Alternate positions can be extremely useful to a trombone player. It can really help smooth out our slide technique. There is some confusion about how to use alternate positions and when, so I thought I'd give a few guidelines, and that's all these are, is just guidelines. Every situation is different, and you'll need to consider each situation musically in order to make a decision about which slide positions to use. The first guideline is move as long as you can in the same direction. In other words, try to avoid slide direction changes. Here's a really good example. It's just the top part of a B flat scale. However, I'm going back and forth an awful lot. If I put that D out in flat 4, I use that alternate position, then I take away a bunch of slide direction changes, which makes my job a lot easier and more efficient. I'm just going out and back in. And in fact, I like to think of alternate positions in terms of keys. So here we are in the key of B flat, and if I've got a scale-wise passage in this octave, I'm pretty much always going to default to that D in flat 4 because of what I just showed you. The same is true for the key of E flat, because the D out in flat 4 is right next to E flat. However, if I'm in the key of C, which has E natural, or F, which of course also has E natural, then I'm not going to use that D in flat 4 as a matter of course. I'm going to come to first because that D is closer to the E natural that's likely to follow. So think about key relationships and alternate positions. Now I'm going to contradict myself and say that if you have adjoining notes that are half steps apart, and you can use an alternate position to save yourself some motion, then you should do that. But that's going to create some slide direction changes, and that's the contradiction. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're in the key of G flat, and you've got G flat to F. Well, you could put that F right out in 6 because you're already in 5th. That's a lot more efficient than using the F in first. I can't even really get that in tune. So in that case, yes, you are changing the slide direction, but you'd be doing that with the F in first also. Another good use of alternate positions is to create natural slurs. And there's another video on Trombone Tools that talks about natural slurs, so I'm not going to go into that, but I do want to point out that if you use an alternate position, oftentimes you can remove your tongue from the equation, which is a really good thing to do because it creates more of a vocal phrasing and tone quality. Here's an example of creating a natural slur with an alternate position. So by putting that D out in flat 4, it meant that I didn't have to tongue any of the notes in this phrase, except the first note just to get the phrase started. If I play something similar with that D in first, I have to tongue in order to avoid the smear. So what I'm proposing is the use of alternate positions in order to create more smoothness to your phrasing. My caveat is, if you can't get that alternate position note in tune, it is not worth using. Please don't forget about another alternate which is not often used, and that is B flat, low B flat on the valve. And that would be in a flat third position. So if I go from A flat to B flat, normally I would come to first, but sometimes it's beneficial to go out and use your valve for that B flat, which looks like this. So I'm moving my slide out to flat 3 in conjunction with using the valve. And to tune that up, you can just match it to first position. That's one of the ways I like to use that, is in the Saint-Saëns, the Third Symphony, the Organ Symphony excerpt. There are certainly other places where you can use that, but it's pretty handy in some situations. And one last thing about alternate positions, take care that they are always in tune and with a proper tone, because a lot of times the alternate position notes won't give you what you need in those areas. And the places to look out for are if something is really loud or very, very exposed, or you have to hold something for a really long time. I would probably default to a primary position in any of those cases. An example might be if you're playing the Mahler 3 solo, which is very loud. Obviously it's a solo, so it's very exposed. I would never really think to use an alternate position there. I'll give you a really good example here. Listen to how I'm creating a natural slur by using an alternate position, like I said before. So that's a really ridiculous use of an alternate position. What I did was I put that B flat out in sharp 5 in order to create a natural slur, because from B flat to A is slurred. But in this case, that's an extremely poor trade-off, because the B flat is of a poor tone quality and it sounds really good in first, and you're right next to the A. This is a really good example of creating these sort of hierarchies in your mind of what's more important. Well, the tone is more important than creating that natural slur. And in this case, I've also jumped and moved my slide a long distance in order to get to an alternate position note, which is almost never a good idea. If I'm going to leap to an alternate position, I want to try and be in that position, and then I'm just going to move my slide a little bit to hit the next note. So for example, G to D. That's okay, because I'm already in fourth. I can find that D really easily. If I'm coming from second position and I need to go to fourth to find that D, that's much more challenging. I would probably never do that. It feels really contrary to my arm, and musically it just doesn't really work.